September 1066. The rolling hills of Yorkshire are about to become a graveyard for an empire. Warriors who crossed an entire ocean, convinced they'd claim a kingdom, are about to face an army they never saw coming. What happens next will end 300 years of Viking terror in a single, blood-soaked afternoon. This isn't just another medieval battle. This is the moment when the old world collided with the new, when Norse legends met English fury, and when one man's lightning-fast decision changed the course of history forever. That September, the sea itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, cutting through the morning fog like a nightmare made real, they appeared. Hundreds of Viking longships, their carved prows rising from the mist, dragons with snarling jaws, serpents coiled for the kill, ravens hungry for the dead. The sun dimmed as their sails blotted out the sky. This wasn't a raid, this was conquest. Leading this armada was a living legend, Harold Hardrada, Norway's king and the last great Viking warlord. His war banner, the Landwaster, snapped violently in the wind, a flag that had seen battlefields from the Byzantine Empire to the frozen rivers of Russia. Hardrada wasn't some untested royal. He was a veteran of the elite Varangian Guard, a mercenary who'd returned from Constantinople with chests of gold and a mind sharpened by decades of warfare. But he wasn't alone. Beside him sailed a man consumed by rage, Tostig Godwinson, the exiled Earl of Northumbria. Tostig's own people had rejected him. His own brother, England's King Harold, had cast him aside. Now, allied with Norway's fiercest warrior, he'd found the perfect weapon for his vengeance. The fleet was massive, over 300 longships, maybe more, carrying 8,000 battle-hardened fighters, mail-clad warriors, archers with quivers full of death, and the dreaded housecarls swinging their terrifying Danish axes. Their oars struck the water in perfect rhythm, a war drum echoing across the waves. They slipped into the river Humber like serpents entering their prey's bloodstream, burning villages as they moved inland. Smoke became their banner, terror became their herald. On September 20th, England tried to stop them. Two northern earls, Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria, threw their forces against the Norse tide at Fulford Gate. The clash was savage. The Viking shield wall absorbed every English charge, then exploded forward like a dam bursting. The English line shattered, men drowned in the marshes trying to escape. Others were hacked down where they stood, their blood mixing with the mud. York, the crown jewel of northern England, had no choice. They surrendered. Hardrada stood victorious, demanding hostages and supplies, already planning his march south to seize the English throne. In his mind, the hardest part was over. King Harold Godwinson was still guarding the southern coast, waiting for William of Normandy's invasion. There was no threat, no urgency, no danger. He was catastrophically wrong. When the news reached King Harold, he wasn't celebrating. He was standing on England's southern shore, eyes locked on the channel, waiting for Norman sails that refused to appear. For weeks, his army had been ready, thousands of men holding a defensive line against an invasion that never came. Then the messenger arrived. The north is burning, York has fallen, your brother fights for Norway now. Most kings would have hesitated, sent diplomats, bought time, prepared slowly. But Harold Godwinson wasn't built like most kings. His blood ran hot with duty and the betrayal cut deeper because the invader's ally was his own flesh and blood. His decision was instant and audacious. March north, march now, march impossibly fast. What happened next defies belief. Harold gathered his elite housecarls, professional warriors in full mail, and the Fiad Levis from the surrounding counties. Then they did something that shouldn't have been possible. They covered 185 miles in just 4 days. To put that in perspective, that's the distance from London to York, mostly on foot in medieval conditions. They moved like a hurricane given human form, sleeping barely at all, eating while marching. Boots pounding dirt roads from sunrise past sunset. Rain hammered down, soaking their woolen cloaks until they were heavy as stone. But the column never slowed. At night, they collapsed beside roadside fires, only to rise before dawn and march again. Messengers raced ahead, gathering reinforcements from every village and town. Locals stood in stunned silence as thousands of armed men thundered past, the metallic clinking of their armor like distant storm clouds rolling in. Harold Hardrada, meanwhile, relaxed in his victory. In his mind, the English king was still weeks away, trapped by the Norman threat. But Harold's march was faster than rumor itself. By the time scouts brought word that the English were coming, it was already too late. September 25, 1066. The morning was deceptively peaceful. Near the small village of Stamford Bridge, Hardrada's warriors lounged in the warm sunshine. Many had left their heavy armor back in York. After all, they were just collecting hostages from the city. No battle expected, no danger anticipated. The river flowed gently past. Birds sang. The grass smelled sweet. Then someone noticed it, a smudge on the horizon, a growing cloud of dust. The earth began to tremble with the rhythm of thousands of marching feet. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't a storm, it was Harold. The Vikings weren't ready for war. Their mail shirts were back in York. Their formations were scattered. Panic erupted through the camp as warriors scrambled for weapons and shields. Harold Hardrada's voice boomed orders as his men rushed toward the wooden bridge spanning the River Derwent. They needed time to organize, time for reinforcements from York, time to form their legendary shield wall. One man gave them that time. A massive Viking warrior armed with a colossal Danish axe positioned himself dead center on the narrow bridge. Alone, facing the entire English vanguard, what happened next became legend. English soldiers charged, his axe rose and fell, shields splintered, skulls cracked, men fell into the river. Again and again they came. Again and again he cut them down. Some say he held that bridge for nearly an hour, his strength and courage buying precious minutes for his brothers in arms. But courage couldn't stop cunning. An English soldier slipped beneath the bridge through the water and thrust his spear upward through the gaps in the wooden planks. The lone defender fell, and the bridge belonged to England. Harold's army flooded across. On the far bank, the Vikings were still scrambling to form their shield wall, some armored, many bare-chested in the oppressive heat. But these were veterans, warriors who'd raided from Ireland to the Mediterranean. Their shield wall rose like an iron fortress. When the two armies met, the sound was like the world breaking. Spears shattered on impact. Swords flashed in the sunlight. Men grappled and stabbed in the suffocating crush, their feet slipping on grass slick with blood. Hardrada himself fought at the front, his massive frame towering above the battle, his blue cloak streaming behind him as he cut down Englishmen with brutal efficiency. The fighting raged for hours under the merciless sun. Then, in a moment that would echo through centuries, Harold Hardrada surged forward in one final furious charge. An English archer drew his bow. An arrow flew. It found the gap in Hardrada's armor and pierced his throat. The giant fell, clutching his banner, the Landwaster, the great raven of Norway, as it dipped toward the blood-soaked earth. Harold Godwinson called out across the battlefield, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Tostig, brother, you can have your lands back. I'll pardon everything. Stand down, end this." Tostig's answer was silence, then steel. The battle continued. Minutes later, he too lay dead among the corpses, cut down in the crush of combat. The Norse line collapsed. Those who could fled toward their ships at Rickall, only to be hunted down by English cavalry. Of the mighty army that had landed weeks before, only fragments survived. Those who made it home swore never to return to England's shores. The Viking age of invasion was finished. Of the 300-plus longships that brought Hardrada's invasion force to England, only about 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. The Viking dream of conquering England died in those fields, but Harold Godwinson paid dearly for his triumph. His men were exhausted, battle-worn, depleted. And even as they buried the dead along the Derwent, a messenger arrived with news that would haunt history. William of Normandy had landed in the south. The weary king had no choice. He turned his battered army around and marched south once more, racing toward a date with destiny at a place called Hastings. But that's a story for another time. Stamford Bridge was the end of an era, the last great Viking invasion crushed in a single day. But for Harold Godwinson, it was only the beginning of his darkest hour. He won the battle, but would he survive the war? If you want to know what happened next, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into one of history's most dramatic moments, hit that like button and subscribe, because history's greatest battles are just getting started.